I can start by introducing myself. My name is Sabrina Davis. I'll be our moderator for today's panel, Young People in Social Security. I am very excited to be here, and I'd like to thank the National Academy of Social Insurance for inviting me to moderate this panel. Some brief information about me. I graduated from the George Washington University. I have a degree in political science with a minor in African American studies. And now I work for Social Security Works. I have been for the past 3 years at least. We are an organization that fights to expand Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now, personally, I got into the Social Security landscape in a very random way. I met our executive director, Alex Lawson, at a sort of progressive get-together, and I joined as a legislative assistant, and now I am managing our social media, where we drive the conversation on Social Security on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Twitter, and we're still calling it Twitter. I don't care what Elon says. Okay. Now, we've come here today because I think, as someone who's particularly on the younger side of Social Security Works' workforce, that it's every generation's responsibility to protect and expand Social Security. So Gen Z and millennials, now it is our turn. And we're going to explore the importance of why people in our age demographic need to engage in the conversation and make sure our voices are present as we protect and expand Social Security. Now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our lovely panelists for today. First, we have Zane Snyder Cox, who is a senior at the George Washington University, raise high. He is also studying political science and economics. Zane's passion for social insurance comes from a desire to ensure that dignity and stability are not privileges, but guarantees, because after a lifetime of hard work, we all deserve to age and retire with dignity or live with dignity in case we become disabled or lose a family breadwinner. Zane is the 2025 Merton Bernstein Intern on Social Insurance and is supporting the Academy's Social Security policy portfolio. Next up, we have Taylor Carty, and she is an ambassador for Able National Resource Center and an intern at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles Pediatric Injury Prevention Center. She received a master's in public health at UCLA. Taylor helps educate the public about ABLE accounts, and she is on the ground witnessing the immense impact that programs like Medicare have on improving the health and quality of life of people with disabilities, as well as the challenges people and families face when trying to obtain and maintain their benefits. Next on our panel, we have Jacob Moore, who got his master's in public policy from the University of Virginia, where he focused on poverty reduction, social welfare programs, and labor rights. Jacob wants to use social justice as a tool for financial security and equity. Jacob was also the 2024 Merton Bernstein Intern on Social Insurance, where he worked with the National Institute on Retirement Security to analyze survey data on generational concerns about Social Security solvency. And last but not least, we have Ben-Ari, who is a 2027 Woodruff Scholar at Emory University School of Law. He's very interested in complex legal decision-making and litigation. Ben graduated from William & Mary with a degree in public policy and brings experience as a law clerk, policy analyst, and research intern. Was the 2022 Merton Bernstein Intern on Social Insurance and is currently serving in the chambers of the Honorable Judge Robert Luck. Did I miss anything? Does any one of our panelists want to throw in something about themselves? I covered all our bases. That's great. All right, so then we're right on time. Let's get started with Zane. If you can come off mute and tell us about Social Security in your own words and its impact on young people.
Thank you so much, Sabrina, and thanks to everyone in the audience for being here. Before I begin, I would be remiss not to thank Aparna Ramakrishnan for being so integral in the planning and organization of this panel. I miss having you in the office with me, and everyone should go and check out her Teen Vogue piece that just came out. for the 90th anniversary of Social Security. Social Security is so much more than a retirement program. It's a broad social insurance system that's delivering critical financial protection to people across all ages, retirees, disabled people, survivors, children, and households facing sudden crises. Children directly benefit from this program. That's not said enough. Nearly 4 million children directly receive benefits because a parent is retired, disabled, or deceased. Children also indirectly benefit. 8.4 million live in households where Social Security helps pay the bills. And that's more than the number of children supported by traditional welfare, TANF, or temporary assistance for needy families. And in 2023, nearly 9% of all US children lived in a home with Social Security income, which is double the share in 2000. Survivor and disability support is also vital. These benefits are often the difference between stability and hardship. Survivor benefits can replace up to 75% of a deceased parent's income, while disability benefits provide essential income for families facing serious health challenges. Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, which falls under the purview of the Social Security Administration, is a key federal income support program for families raising children with disabilities and individuals and older adults, covering everything from basic living expenses to specialized care. Social Security's reach also extends to grandparents raising children, which is a group that's grown significantly in the last decade. Over half of grandparent caregivers rely on Social Security, either their own retirement or disability benefits, to help meet the needs of children in their care, needs that can include food, housing, clothing, and school expenses. And while young adults might not see themselves as potential beneficiaries, disability can strike at any age, making Social Security's disability insurance such a critical backstop for workers in their 20s and 30s. A 2021 study showed that Social Security reduces people's risk of bankruptcy by 20%, the risk of foreclosure by 33%, and the risk of home loss by 15% for people who receive disability benefits. It's also important for younger generations to remember that we are already paying into Social Security. Every paycheck we receive comes with that 6.2% payroll tax, which is a contribution to the system, not just for our own future benefits, but to support people in our communities who need help today. This is not a welfare program. It's earned insurance that we are actively funding, creating a shared pool of resources that we will also rely on one day. For young people, this means Social Security isn't just an abstract policy or a paycheck deduction. It's a living system that supports people we know, and in many cases, people in our own households. Understanding that broad impact is key to seeing Social Security not as someone else's benefit, but as a shared promise that strengthens families and communities now and for generations to come. But we have a problem. Americans, and particularly Gen Z and millennials, are pessimistic about Social Security's future. A 2023 study by the Nationwide Retirement Institute found that 2/5 of Gen Z and millennials believe they will not get a single dime of the Social Security benefits they have earned. And 3/4 of Gen Z and millennials believe that they will need to continue working in retirement because Social Security will not pay enough. So that pessimism was honestly the inspiration for this discussion. We want to clear up misconceptions about the program, highlight the ways it already benefits younger generations, and show why it's worth protecting and strengthening for the future.
Thank you, Zane. That was a really informed answer. I really appreciate that. something that you said that stuck out to me was that disability can strike at any moment. And that leads me to my next question for Taylor. Stats show that today, 1 in 4 20-year-olds will experience some form of disability before they reach retirement age. In your own words, why is Social Security such a vital support for people with disabilities? And if you're comfortable, could you share any experiences related to this?
Thanks, Sabrina. And like Zane said before, I just wanted to thank everyone, particularly Aparna too, for coordinating the whole event. She's been absolutely amazing. So I just want to give her a shout out. Life never goes according to plan, and it can change in an instant. And I can say, like, disability is one of the few things that just never discriminates, and it can just happen to any one of us at any time. And Social Security offers a safety net. It offers economic stability, especially during a time when people are often at the lowest point in their lives that they may experience. And it offers a way forward. And when I think about the families that I've worked with and helped to, whether they're on SSI and using that just to take a breath, just to stay above water. For example, just this one woman I know who just uses it for food and basic necessities, or whether it's another mom that I know that has two sons, teenage sons with autism, and they're both nonverbal and they need si- significant care, but she desperately relies on the Medicaid that's attached to SSI to make sure that they not only are okay in their daily lives, but also that just they have that protection. And just in terms of thinking about not only the protection that Security can offer, but also how it can offer a path forward. I have a friend who was in a car accident when she was very young, and she ended up being paralyzed from the neck down. And that's a life-changing event. Um, and you have to deal with so much. And there's so much uncertainty, especially within that moment. But as she went forth, she received SSI benefits, and she went to college, and she went to medical school, and now she's about to finish her residency. And it just shows what the potential that having a safety net like Social Security can offer someone. Just in being able to not only think of it as, okay, let's just make sure this person stays above water, which is critical for millions, especially since 11 million plus are on some form of disability benefits, but also if you give a person a chance, what their life will become if you could just give them the opportunity. So for me, like just seeing all of that potential, it just shows that Social Security, we just can't do anything to it. It's critical.
Absolutely. Social Security is insurance. It's not an investment that you're hoping to make hundreds of millions of dollars on in the future. It's something to be sure that when that random day comes, you're prepared in some way. It's not all over. Okay. Thank you so much, Taylor, for that really thoughtful answer. Now I'm going to target Jacob. So you were with the National Institute for Retirement Security, and during your time there, you analyzed polling data on Social Security. From your research, can you tell us the 411 on young people's opinions on Social Security?
Sure, absolutely. Um, I want to first start by shouting out two individuals from the National Institute on Retirement Security that helped me out majorly with this report last year. Tyler Bond, I guess you could say co-writer and research director there, and then as well as Dan Doonan, who's the executive director. So one thing I want to start with is a quick little personal anecdote. I remember being in 10th grade in one of our history classes, and for some reason, a bunch of us had started talking about how we thought we would never get Social Security. Oh, it's going to run out of money. It's not going to be there for us. And our teacher, who I would say is part of the baby boomer generation, looked at us and said, listen, guys, it's going to be there for y'all. When I was y'all's age, we had this same exact fear as y'all, and I'm near retirement now, and I'm about to start getting Social Security. So I use that anecdote to help give color to the main finding of our report last summer, which was that confidence in Social Security is largely dependent on age and not generation. So the point I want to make about that is that Gen Z is not unique in having a low confidence level in Social Security right now. When we looked at longitudinal data over 60 years of polling asking this question about confidence levels, we see similar confidence levels across generations at the same age. So for example, when baby boomers were the age of Gen Zers are now, they showed strikingly similar confidence levels. And so the point to take away here is that Gen Z, as the youngest adult generation, you could call them, is not seeing this massive shift away from confidence or support for Social Security. We actually see the opposite, which is that, as expected, yes, there's low confidence right now because retirement is decades away, but across the board, support for the system is consistent across generations and also party lines. So that's one of the big misconceptions that our report set out to dispel, was not that, no, Gen Z is not going to be the generation that completely overhauls or privatizes the system that's been functioning for 90 years. With that being said, I want to shift over to talking about polling that was done by the Academy, AARP, NERS, and then as well as the Chamber of Commerce. And their polling recently found that overwhelmingly the consensus across those who were surveyed is that we should contribute more towards Social Security in order to fill the funding gap. And you see this across the board, across generations, across party lines. Whichever way you cut the data demographically, we see that this is an overwhelming consensus among voters. 80%, in fact, said that we should not reduce benefits for Social Security, and we should increase benefits, even if that means paying more into the system through additional taxes. With that being said, I just want to make it very clear that Gen Z is not the generation that is going to end Social Security, and we should not be treated as any different than the generations that came before us in terms of our opinions on this vital system that we've had set up. The very last thing I'll finish up by saying is that one big misconception that I hear over and over again among young people that I want to clear up is that Social Security will not simply run out of money. There's a lot of discussions right now. You hear people talking about the 2033 trust fund depletion date. And the key thing to remember with that is that when that trust fund depletes, which is filled with reserve revenue that's been built up over decades. When that depletes, the system will not disappear. The system will still have money to pay out to beneficiaries as long as people are paying into it. And so with that 2033 number you hear about, at that time, if no action is taken, then the system would still be able to pay out about 80% of the promised benefits. So while it is far from ideal that we approach this cliff and fall off it and let the reserve revenue run out, that does not mean that suddenly overnight nobody gets benefits and that's the end forever. So yeah, that's how I'll finish up.
Thank you so much for that, Jacob. I really appreciate it. Now we're gonna move on to a story with Ori. Can you please tell us the story of what sparked your interest in Social Security and how that interest translated into your research?
Sure. So first of all, I'd like to thank the Academy again for having me here. You guys are fantastic every year, and Bill, Arnaud, and Ariella really helped launch the story and this trajectory that I've had. At William and Mary, I was a public policy student, and I actually wrote a paper about raising the minimum retirement age for Social Security. And then I ended up having an interview with Bill Arnaud where he promptly shred that, who's the former CEO of the Academy, and he promptly shred that notion. And he said, there are much better ways to reform the system. This is probably not a good reason. Here's why. And that in that moment of learning, I think that really started my story, and learning that there's a lot more about Social Security than what originally meets the eye. I ended up interning at the Academy in 2022. And I read the entire trustees report from the same year, which is probably one of the reasons that younger generations are not particularly interested, because reading a 500-page report filled with actuarial definitions is not that sexy or entertaining. But I think the problem for Social Security and Social Security policy is that it's not considered a sexy issue, despite it making up 25% of the federal budget and it being the largest government program that literally every single person will interact with at some point. So I ended up doing a research paper through the Academy and a fantastic support team with, we presented this innovative policy option for Social Security to the chief actuary of the US and Canada. They were very interested in it. I'm more than happy to talk about that later if we end up talking about potential resolutions to the current deficit and problems. But again, I think Jacob hit it right on the head. It's not going to run out, Social Security, and I think that is the biggest misconception that we have today. That being said, a 20% actuarial reduction is pretty significant, especially for the third or two-thirds of Americans whose that is the only source of income that they have. So depending on the numbers and how you slice it. So I think those are at least the first things that we really should get out of the door. And I really do think that historically it's been one of the most successful programs of getting people out of poverty. The reason this was passed in, I think, 1934, was because there were so many elderly people that weren't impoverished and they had such a low quality of life. And we've seen so many elderly people now jump out of poverty and really be contributing both to the economy, but also be able to, as Zane said, like live out their life with dignity. And I think that's particularly important. And I think the last thing I want to talk about before we get into any reform options are, yes, the trust funds in 2033 or 2034, depends how you slice it, are gonna run out, and there's still gonna be an 80% benefit level from what we see currently. But any choice to act or not to act now is going to dramatically change how we participate in the system going forward. So if we choose, for example, not to act until that date, any contribution rates, and I call it contribution rates because Bill Arnaud has drilled that into me. It's not a tax, it's a contribution. any contribution rate increase that we see now or actuarial decrease in benefits that we see now is going to be significantly harder on our generation should we choose to delay it these 8 years until it comes out. So whatever we say, we have to, just like other more sexy issues, we have to advocate for ourselves now in order to not see those really dramatic decreases in benefits or increases in contribution rates that would really throw a lot of things into flux. And I'm happy to talk more about the viability of certain reform options, but if we do that now or later, you just let me know, Sabrina.
Will do. Thank you so much for that, Ori. Now I'm going to turn back to Taylor, and we are going to discuss some of those dastardly SSI asset limits. And your area of expertise is able accounts, and those accounts let people with disabilities under the age of 26 save and invest money without losing access to their most needed federal benefits. What do you see as the future of able accounts and asset limits?
Thanks, Sabrina. So I just first want to start off by saying, like, initially, like, several years ago, I knew very little about able accounts, and it was just so many people that were on means tested benefits programs. Just there was no way forward to save. I mean, you were just kept in the same cycle of poverty just to keep your access to vital programs that helped you. And I think just with ABLE, if it offered a way out, and just in terms of the future of it, Senator Casey and his colleagues recently, at least they just passed the Enable Act, which enshrines like 3 ABLE provisions into law permanently, and that was the 529 rollovers, which allowed people to roll over their funds into an ABLE account, and also to contribute above the standard amount up to the federal poverty level, as well as to make sure that the Savers Credit was available, which allows people who have contributed a certain amount into their ABLE account to take that credit on their taxes. So going forward, those provisions now, anyone who is eligible for an ABLE account will be able to take, and that's critical just for their future. And I would say, most importantly, like in 2026, the Able Age Adjustment Act is going to come into effect, which allows 6 million additional people to become eligible for ABLE accounts, essentially because ABLE accounts are currently only a person who incurred their disability before the age of 26 is eligible to open an ABLE account. That age rises to 46 starting January 1st of next year. And because of that, part of the 6 million is that 1 million veterans will become eligible to use ABLE accounts as a tool, which is critical because traditionally when you're forced to just have $2,000 in assets, you cannot plan for emergencies and you cannot just plan for life. Things happen, and having a disability is expensive. And you just want to be prepared for that, especially if a person just incurred their disability and, for example, they got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease or they suffered a spinal cord injury. And not only are they adapting to a new life, but there's just a lot of paperwork that goes along with that. And just figuring out the resources the additional resources one needs. And just especially in this changing environment, where even with California, where the asset limit was eliminated, it's actually going to be reinstated, not to a $2,000 level, but to $130,000. And during these past 2 years, people have made plans based on its elimination, and people were starting to receive inheritances. And so that's really where able accounts, they just offer the freedom that changing policy environments, just no just no matter what just happens at any time in the future, um, they'll be able to use them as a tool, along with other just resources such as special needs trust and other things.
Thank you so much. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the current SSI asset limit is $2,000, right?
Yes.
I just flew from the UK and both of my flights were messed up. I had to spend close to that amount of money to get myself home. So I can only imagine what I would have needed to spend if I had a different kind of emergency, a health emergency where I really don't have much of a choice but to spend that money, you know?
And no, that's exactly true. And I think especially for parents with young children, like just who are, especially for children with disabilities, and there's so much uncertainty about a future, that just having that resource available and saying, you know what, I'm going to save for my child. I'm going to make sure that no matter what happens, it's going to be there. And I mean, they're not perfect, but even like when you think working in college, you typically don't have access to a 401k, but you do have access to an ABLE account. And so, parents, your friends, just strangers are able to contribute to it, and it's there, and it will grow tax-free, and as long as you use it for a disability-related expense, while it might seem narrow, the list by the IRS is actually extremely broad, and so basically you can use it for many things. And you aren't taxed on it, so it's just another way.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And now I'm going to head back to Jacob because Jacob is our resident truth teller. Not that we all aren't, but I wanted to ask you, Jacob, if there are any misconceptions about Social Security that you want to clear up.
Sure, absolutely. So, the main one I touched on a little bit before already, which was the idea that Social Security will run out of money. And just to reiterate that a little bit, I just want to make clear that, as long as there is money going into the system, there will always be money to go out of the system. Social Security is not really a retirement account. It's not really the kind of system where you put money in and that money is then sitting there for you for decades until you're ready to retire. Um, Social Security is a social insurance program, meaning that it functions in the same way that your private, say, health insurance would, in that it relies on people paying into it in order to pool resources across a bunch of people, and therefore pool risk as well. And then once somebody faces the kind of risk that the system is set up to anticipate, so in this case, traditionally people think of Social Security as the system who gives benefits to retirees, the elderly. In this case, this system is trying to insulate you from not being able to work anymore. And so for many people, that is simply just due to old age. So it relies on all workers paying into the system their entire life so that one day when they are no longer able to work, that money, they will have money paid to them to ensure their financial security due to the people who are currently paying in at that day and time. So I'll just finish that up by saying that to young people, it's important that, and I really liked this point that was made by Ori about it being a contribution rather than a tax, because that money that you are paying today from every paycheck into Social Security, that money is directly going into the pockets of somebody who can no longer work right now. And so I think that that's just a much better way that people our age can frame it in their heads, rather than thinking it as, oh, the government's taking my money. Like, yes, but they're giving that directly to somebody who's retired or disabled today.
Thank you. That was really beautifully put. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to follow up with you, Ori. So, in the most recent trustees report, we are estimating that the old age and survivors insurance will only be solvent until 2033. That's the year we've all been floating around, where around 77 to 80% of benefits would be able to pay out. And that is only if Congress fails to act. Recent legislation signed by the president earlier this summer is expected to move that date up even sooner. What would you say to policymakers as a member of one of the generations that those cuts would directly affect?
Sure. So I'd like to start with I read Bob Ball's book, who is one of the architects of Social Security and Social Security reform. And it talked about the 1983 conference, about kind of how they settled that funding crisis. And what they did there was they kind of kicked the can down the road to us, which, in the political sphere, any solution that fixes the problem for 50 years is probably a very popular sphere. But unfortunately, it kind of fell onto us that these reserves and the OSDI trust funds are not depleted. So we also have a menu of options before us. And so if I was advising a policymaker, I can run through quickly some of the traditional and less traditional options to. So I wouldn't call it a funding crisis, because that kind of says, again, we're not going to get any benefits. We are going to get benefits in 2033, but at least reduce the actuarial hit that we may receive in 2033. So, I mean, as we all know, we can either cut spending or increase contribution rates. So those are the traditional two options. Cutting spending is generally a more conservative idea, and increasing contribution rates is generally more left-wing idea. But I mean, there are people on the aisle on both sides that may agree or disagree on this. I think any serious package is probably going to involve a little bit of both. Cutting benefits significantly is really going to make life a lot more difficult for the millions of Americans that use Social Security as their only source of income. So cutting only from the cutting side is really not a viable option. And as we heard from Jacob previously, something like 80% of Americans want more contributions, are willing to pay more contributions in order to keep benefit levels, which is a bonkers idea, because Americans don't like taxes, and we can't get 80% of people to agree on anything. But agreeing to raise taxes or contributions on a program just shows how salient and politically popular Social Security really is. So personally, I think that if we're really looking at what the people want, it's increasing these contribution rates gradually. Now, there are also some less traditional ways to increase it, to decrease the deficit, and that would be increasing the minimum retirement age. And although I wrote my paper on that, I completely disavow that previously, because that disproportionately impacts blue-collar workers that may be working for longer amounts of time. And those are the people that really do need Social Security. And it's really hard manual labor is very difficult to do, especially when you're 70 or 75, like some of these proposals rate. So that's not really a viable option. England actually tried it out, and it ended up being a pretty disastrous over there, at least. Now, there's also raising the taxable minimum, and everyone that knows me at the Academy knows I like using the LeBron James analogy, which essentially says LeBron James, who makes something like $50 million a year, will pay the same amount of contributions into Social Security as a family of two hardworking teachers are making $70,000 a year, because we have a taxable maximum at $150,000, something like that. And there's been a lot of proposals and there's a lot of popularity to at least increase the taxable maximum by, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000, or scrapping it completely. Now that's subject to political will, but that's something that's really important and should be done, especially as income disparities continue to grow in the States. Now, there's also the idea of taxing unearned income, which is a lot less popular with some conservative leaning and just wealthier people in general, taxing things like capital gains or all these different things. And that may not be as politically popular. That's just the truth. So maybe that's not the way to do it, but it would bring a lot of flush cash into the system that desperately needs it right now. And now the political will to touch Social Security is really the main problem here. It's was considered for a long time a third rail. No one wanted to mess with it because it's so popular, and no one wants to reform it in case there's a lot of pushback. So Bill Arnone and I, who was the former CEO of the Academy, led this research team and kind of took inspiration from Sweden, Japan, and Canada, who all have adjustable rate mechanisms. And putting it very simply, that means we don't have to act and we don't have to kick down the can down the road. And instead, the contribution rate, if this thing ever passes, automatically adjusts absent legislative action. So that means we won't face a funding crisis like we will see in 2033. Instead, the rate will automatically go up or down depending on the demographic needs of the population. So that makes it attractive to people who are worried about benefits, because you're guaranteed your legislative benefits as you go forward, because the rate will automatically adjust absent any legislative action. But it also presents the possibility that within demographic shifts, the rate might go down and you'll have to pay less in contributions. It just adjusts to make sure that everyone receives that intergenerational promise that we want to make sure continues on to the next generation. Although we have to commend the work of Bob Ball in 1983, we can't keep pushing the can down the road, because that wouldn't be faithful, and that wouldn't be, we wouldn't have fidelity to the next generation who we owe this promise to as well. So this adjustable rate mechanism is probably the best idea. And it also may be politically popular because, who doesn't want to be in the Congress that solved the Social Security problem, right? So at least that may present some sort of political impetus to continue forward with that. I know that's a lot of different menus and a lot of different options, but the point is we have options. But just as Jacob and Zane both said, like, if we don't act now, those jumps in the contribution rates or the actuarial deficits may be much greater and much more dramatic than if we acted now earlier and gradually increased that, which would make it more palatable to all Americans. I know that was a lot, but at least those are, if I was like sat on the shoulders of some senators, that's what I'd whisper in their ears.
Awesome. Thank you, Ori. We are getting close to our end time, so we are going to enter a lightning round. Okay, I have some questions prepared and some that Zane also helped me put together. So we're going to start really quickly. What was your first job and how old were you when you made your first contribution to Social Security? I was 16 when I got my first paycheck, and I was a camp counselor. Zane?
I was 15. I was a pool and beach lifeguard and a waiter at a beach club.
Nice. Jacob?
I was likewise a lifeguard, and I was 16.
Okay. Taylor?
Teaching assistant in college, 20, I think.
And Ori?
I was also a 16-year-old camp counselor, shocked at how little I was making.
Okay. Yes, of course. And I couldn't believe they took what little I had. I really wanted it right then and there, but I'm glad I did make that contribution because it's going to be there for me when I retire. Now, what is one thing you want younger generations to know about Social Security? And we'll start with Zane again.
Yeah. one thing I want younger generations to know about Social Security, it's deeply connected to issues that we already care about. Take immigration. It's not often framed as relating to Social Security, but the reality is that immigrants, both documented and undocumented, strengthen Social Security's finances by paying into the system through payroll contributions, not taxes, as Ori has hammered home. Undocumented immigrants pay in without ever receiving benefits themselves. And so restrictive immigration policies and deportations have actually been shown to weaken Social Security by shrinking the contributor base and accelerating trust fund depletion. Kathleen Romig released a report on this. She's with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, estimating that the combined effect of all the administration's actions, which also includes tariffs, which I haven't touched on, would move Social Security's reserve depletion date up by 3 years to 2030. So immigration is an extremely relevant topic when discussing this program. Another issue for young people, briefly, is artificial intelligence. But a lot of people don't know that the Social Security Administration is actively integrating AI into critical functions. The 1-800 line, when you call SSA, is now answered by an AI-powered phone system, which has been criticized for misinterpreting simple questions, providing irrelevant answers, and trapping callers in loops. Jen Burdick from Community Legal Services Philadelphia has done a ton of work on this and has expressed how frustrating the system can be for people trying to access their benefits or even just speak to a real person. There's also Imagine, which is an AI tool used in disability case processing that analyzes medical evidence and actually assigns a percentage for the likelihood of whether a case meets SSA's criteria for disability. These technologies, for me, raise serious questions about automation bias, which is the risk that human decision makers will over-rely on AI outputs, even when their own judgment contradicts them, which can decrease human power in decision making. And it's especially important to remember that disability, by definition, exists outside the statistical norm, which means that AI systems primarily trained on normative data sets might not be well suited for use in disability determinations cases. So I would just emphasize to younger generations how Social Security is intertwined with issues that are at the top of our generation's mind. Immigration, AI, I didn't even touch on issues like economic justice and labor rights, but these issues are on the top of our minds and directly shaping our future.
Thank you, Zane. Jacob, you have been our storyteller, our truth teller, and now you're going to be our myth buster. What is one myth you would like to bust about Social Security?
Yes, absolutely. So one big myth that I see people still repeating to this day is that kind of this idea that Social Security is a like Ponzi scheme, where the people who paid in first, got all the fruits of it. But the more and more people that, in later years are paying into it are going to see littler and littler from it. And what I would say to that is that as long as we are ensuring that enough funding is going into the system, we can ensure that it is there for another 90 years. And I'll very shortly close by saying that this is an incredibly important system. And as our generation has a lot of anxiety about finances, being able to buy a home, being able to retire comfortably, what I would say is that supporting Social Security and ensuring that we keep the system functioning for decades to come is the biggest thing that we can do to ensure that we're not living in poverty when we are no longer able to work.
Yeah. And Taylor, same question to you. What is a myth you would like to bust about Social Security?
I think Just in terms of so many people just think about security being for when you turn 62 at the earliest. And just again, disability can happen to any one of us at any time. And I think that just it's okay to ask questions because the more questions you ask, the more informed you're going to be. And it's better to know now when you can hopefully prepare. And even so many Americans just rely on Social Security as their only source of income. And it's not always possible, but if there's ways that you can think, okay, I'm working this month, if I can log into my Social Security account and see my records, see what my potential benefit is going to be. And I know that it depends on policy changes, but still people can have that information to make informed decisions. And if they can say, okay, what potentially can I do to help me prepare along with Social Security, so that I can, hopefully, if you don't have a disability, have the entire retirement you envision, or if you do, be okay. And yeah, I think it's just making sure that like you keep asking those questions.
Yeah. When the administration turned over, I learned that I can log into my Social Security account and see my entire history of employment and contributions that I've made. So that's something really useful that everyone can keep for their own records. And finally, Ori, I'm gonna come back to you. What can policymakers and advocates do to better reach young people, and what can young people also do to better reach their policymakers, so that way we can have a sort of back and forth discussion on Social Security and how we can work together for this?
Yeah, so I think our generation is not equipped really to read these like really long reports with so much going on. I'm not saying we have to do like a TikTok drop for the trustees report. Maybe that's an idea. But something that I think is important is just framing the problem simply or making these analogies to things that are really relevant and current in our lives and emphasizing how important this issue is and how it is reaching every single one of us. And it's not something that we can just wait for. It's something that we there are consequences for not acting now. It's not just something that we have to solve in 2033 or whenever down the road. No, there are policy implications now if we don't act. So we personally at the Academy, I think they're a fantastic function for this. They put out a young person's guide to Social Security. Forums like this are really important. We put out a podcast a few years ago with some really prominent members in the Academy and beyond. But I think the most important thing is just reach young people in their medium, right? No one's gonna go through and try to navigate the Social Security website and read all these reports. We have to make it palatable for them. For younger people. And the same thing goes for policymakers. Policymakers will often take Social Security for granted, and this will just be another thing that they may have to worry about it someday. But if we have young people going and advocating for them for Social Security, that will reach eventually, and making it a more palatable and more sexy or current issue, that's really the way to do it.
Awesome. And finally, for everyone, what is one of your retirement dreams? I want to crochet and live in an overgrown, creepy house with a lot of cats and be like the neighborhood Boo Radley. Feel free to jump in whoever you want.
Well, first of all, I wish that your cat Disco made an appearance.
He's been here the entire time.
I love that. I'd love to split my time between a beach somewhere warm and like a little apartment in a busy city so that I can get the best of both worlds.
Nice. Ori?
Yeah, I'll take cues from the late, great Andy Achenbaum, who was one of our speakers, and teach a little bit on the side, write a little bit on the side, and occasionally hop on a Social Security podcast and use some expletives. I think that would be pretty fun.
Taylor? You're muted. Oh, I can see the dream in your eyes. Taylor, honey, you got on mute.
I think just spending time with my family and just like using all the information like that I've gathered over the years to help just like younger generations and specifically whatever the policy climate holds going forward. Um, just making sure that people know that too reform isn't bad at all. Just we I think we can all get so stuck in like a certain mindset that um we can be afraid of change, but like Ori said, like reform, like the sooner we think about the possibilities, then the sooner people can become engaged and really think, okay, what is it that we do want? And how do we want to see um the world as we envision it?
Awesome. And Jacob, before you can close us out, what is one of your retirement dreams?
I imagine myself living somewhere near the water, and I want to have a really big garden where I can grow a bunch of yummy food and give it out to people that are near me.
And we wonder why seniors retire to Florida. Okay, and Zane, after a discussion like this, the question that I find usually at the front of my mind, and a lot of people often agree, is what can we do? So what would your call to action be for young people who want to learn more about Social Security and advocate for reform?
Thank you, Sabrina, and thank you for ending on a call to action, because so often in conversations like this, it's easy to dwell on the challenges that lie ahead and to lose sight of what we can actually do today. My call to action to young people is to start by making Social Security personal. Talk to your older relatives, mentors, or friends who receive benefits and ask what Social Security means to them. You might find that it's the reason they can pay rent, afford medications, or support their families, but you'll quickly see how deeply this program is embedded in the lives of the people that you care about. Those conversations make the program real and help you, and certainly helped me to see that protecting the system is about protecting the people you love. Then engage your congresspeople and make it personal. Tell them that Social Security matters to you, that you want your full benefits down the line, and that they have a responsibility to ensure that this program remains solvent, not just for our own generation, but for our parents and grandparents and loved ones who rely on it today. Let them know that protecting Social Security is about preserving economic security and dignity across all stages of life. Be specific in what you're asking for. Urge them to reject proposals that cut benefits or raise the retirement age, to support measures that strengthen the program's finances, and to ensure that any reforms protect vulnerable beneficiaries, especially older adults and the disability community. Remember, policymakers respond to constituents who speak up. It's their job. And finally, remember that Social Security has endured for 90 years because people stood up for it across generations. Our generation's voice matters in this ongoing story and this ongoing promise. And the earlier we step into it, the more power we have to shape it. Social Security's future will be shaped by the people who show up, and that's why our generation's voice matters now more than ever.
Amen. As I said earlier in our discussion, it is every generation's responsibility to protect and expand Social Security for their generations and the generations after them. And I'm so happy to be involved in this fight with this group of people who are so focused and it's so personal for them. So I would like to wrap up and thank our audience all for attending, and shout out Zane and Aparna and the National Academy of Social Insurance for inviting me to moderate. Please feel free to connect with me or any of our other panelists if you'd like to find out more about ways you can engage young leaders in this conversation. And as the great Rihanna said, be better have my money, okay? Social Security is our money. Let's make sure we get it. Thank you, everyone.